G'day guys, Mac with the Circle, and today I want to talk about the Nurgle miniatures I've been working on. I want to compare a bit of what I've done in the last day, in the last couple of days, to something I painted a few years ago. Talk about the changes in my style, how I think I've evolved as a painter, and where I've got to go moving forward, just as a bit of a creative thing. I'm also going to talk about the Christmas/10,000 subscriber giveaway I'm going to do, and how you can enter into that. And we'll go from there. So that'll be at the end of the video, the giveaway details, for those who are curious and just want to skip to the end. So first things first, I think the current Games Workshop Nurgle aesthetic is a bit too cutesy, a little bit too happy, and if there's one thing Nurgle's really not, it's happy. Now, Nurgle as a god may be happy, but his followers usually aren't. There are of course exceptions to the rule, but if you think of 40k, the Death Guard, they're so bitter at what they've become. They hate what they are. They feel that they represent their own weakness and shame. They're not happy. And when I paint my Nurgle miniatures, whether it's Death Guard or whether it's fantasy style like Age of Sigmar, I want them to be gruesome, grossome, disgusting. And with that in mind, the first model I thought I'd paint was this model right here. It's not perfect, but this is done almost entirely with washes. It's just a black base coat with a white zenithal highlight, and then mostly, washes. And pretty much all Games Workshop paints as well, and technicals. After him, I did Gutrot Spume. So, again, I want to have this sort of creepy, disgusting look with slime and a lot of dark colours clashing with the pale colours of the flesh, that kind of thing, as well as some technicals like Blood for the Blood God, some of that Nilica Oxide, because I want these models to look gross and disgusting. And lastly, a Plaguebearer Herald, which I bought years ago for another Nurgle project, and I just never got around to painting until the other day. Now, it may shock some of you to hear this, but something like the Gutrot Spume and this Herald only take about an hour each to paint. I think it was about an hour and a half for Gutrot. Because I've got a system of painting, and that system is basically, we'll pretend that these are the paints I'm going to use. I just go, alright, I'm going to do everything that needs this colour first, then I'm going to do everything that needs this colour, then everything that needs this colour. And I work my way through the colours in a logical order. And I've decided what I'm already going to be using as my colours prior to actually starting the project. So I'm not stuffing around making my own mixes and trying to work it out as I go. By doing this, I save a ton of time. That's just neither here nor there, but I thought people would be interested in how I paint and paint quickly. Now, let's talk about these two. So, first things first, I bought this model back in 2011, painted it, won a painting competition, was pretty happy about it. However, I went back in 2013 because I'd gotten better as a painter and added a few more details and touched it up, and I'm still happy with it, but let's talk about some of the features. So, we've got white pallid eyes, no extra detail in the eyes there, in the face. The antlers, the horns on the head are really more of just a bleached colour, a bone colour, like the horns you'd see displayed at like a hunting lodge, like a dead deer or something. I've used a lot of the Nurgle's Rot technical paint and some textured paint to add some texture to the sword blade and give this real gooiness to the intestinal tract and to the weeping pustulous areas around the spine. For the buboes in the arms, I've gone for this real pustulous look, like it's skin that's been burnt or just flensed in some way, stripped clean, and it's just weeping that yellowish plasma that we do when we get a blister or something. And I looked at things like corpses and that kind of thing to go with the colours, so I've used these real pallid flesh tones and a lot of blues in like the crevices on the miniature, just to really sell it. And I haven't gone for too much wetness around the wounds because, well, dead bodies don't emit too much moisture, do they? because there's not really much to emit because there's no blood pumping around anymore, that kind of thing. So I've gone for really pale cuts and wounds. And the base was a Secret Weapon Miniatures base, which I added a whole bunch of different basing textures into and filled with a wet effect, and I was pretty happy with it at the time. Now let's contrast that with how things have changed. So this model probably took me 2-3 days to paint back in 2013. This model over here, I've spent maybe 7 hours on it so far. So to give you some idea, that's a lot quicker, right? I haven't got the other brother glued on yet because I've not quite finished him, but he would sit up there on this Glotkin miniature. Originally it was going to be another Great Unclean one for my army, which is why I got rid of all the weird Nurgle posts and banners that were sticking up off the back and cleaned it right up because I don't like that overcrowded aesthetic. But I decided recently that since I was painting a few Blightkins just to... I was painting the Maggotkin just to get away from power armor, because I painted so much bloody power armor. I wanted to paint some flesh, and I decided to dig it out again, paint it up in that way. Now, this miniature is different. So let's talk about why. So all the horns, I've gone for this dark ivory look. I think it's just something more sickly about dark colours clashing with the light, which is why on, say, these buboes on the back and on the leg, they're this glossy black, and it just looks infectious, like it's something erupting and growing out from your skin that's not of you. Now, sure, a blister, like on this Great Unclean one, like on the arm here, a blister is, ugh. You know, that looks like a weeping wound to me, and if you looked at it up close, you'd be able to see there's all these tiny little red freckles in there, and like the little veins and clots, and it's disgusting stuff, and it's realistic, but it doesn't translate anywhere near as well or as creepily to your brain as I think something like these little black pustules and buboes oozing out of the flesh in all these different points does. They almost look like spider eyes or something. It's just hideous to behold. So that's another thing. With the flesh, I've used a lot of purple tones now and reds instead of just going for that cold blue constantly. This way we get a variance over the miniature and we're able to pick out more of these fat folds, because the fat folds are where I want the bruising and the purples to be applied. And it just looks nastier because of it. With things like the arms, I've gone for a tonal change. So it starts out as the same colour as the rest of the fleshy arm, and then as we go down it blends through some browns and into some blacks, and I've got all this slime encrusting it. And same in on the intestines. There's all slime deep down in there. It's ugh. And on the weapon, the face, I've actually gone and I've painted in the eye and around the eye details and the lower half of the face. Again, purples. These purple tones really help to bring it to life. It's just one of those weird things. So by doing something that's a bit less realistic, like your face being two completely different colours from above and below the top lip, it looks better on a painted model. And so this is where you've got to let the realism step aside, I think, for some creative license. And then, of course, you've got this weird proboscis arm here, which, again, I've slimed it up. This is just using a regular craft glue, by the way. It's a clear, really strong-smelling glue. You can just buy it at any hobby shop. Use it for like model planes and balsa wood, and I would just like pick a point, touch it, and then drag a string to the next point, touch it, and break it off. And that's how I get the slime. It's a super easy effect. I might even do a quick tutorial on it one day. And of course, anywhere where like the strapping goes on the body as well, there's a thin mix of Carenberg Crimson, Druchii Violet wash in there, just to make it look like it's a little bit bruising or a little bit damaging to the flesh underneath. So those few changes there, I think, really make it stand out. And of course, anywhere where there's a sore, instead of going for dried flesh, I've used a slight amount of glossiness to it. So it's a little bit wet and just, again, that little bit more creepy and authentic. On the base now, what I've done is I've actually just sanded it back and airbrushed and washed some different green shades into it, and purple around the base of the rocks. And then I've gone over this with a wet effect. And what that's allowing me to do is create this illusion of him walking through liquid as opposed to actually being walking through liquid like the other miniature is. The rocks, of course, are all done with cork. The idea of cork, of course, is break it into inorganic shapes. Make it, don't make it square and flat and that kind of thing. Break it into weird, lumpy masses and use that. So that's how I've noticed that my Nurgle has changed, and why. And it's the same technique I've applied to, say, the rider on top of the miniature, where I've gone for these really pallid tones and these rusty, nasty looks. See the scythe there. Trying to get away from the pure realism and a little bit hyper-real without going into that cartoonish Games Workshop territory. And I think it's a creepier effect. I like this model much more now than this Great Unclean one. Another thing to note, of course, is that the symbology of Nurgle is now dialed up to ridiculous levels with 40k and Age of Sigmar to some extent. But this Great Unclean one here has a little Nurgle symbol on his belly, on his sword, and the buboes on his arm. That's it. This guy up here has it on his arm, on top of his torso, on his leg, on his lower leg, on his belly, on his back, on this leg over here. There's a lot of Nurgle symbols. 7 on this guy. I get it, it's the Nurgle magic number. I don't know if it's just a way to fill in detail in the miniatures or what, but I don't know that I'm a huge fan of it. But in any case, that's how things have changed. So as a painter, I'm always trying to evolve and figure out how to beat myself next. What can I do better than the last model? Because the worst thing you can do is get complacent and think you're the best at everything. I know I'm not. I know I'm better than a lot of people, perhaps, but I've also been doing it a lot longer than other people, so I can't judge myself against others. I can only judge myself, well, against myself. So that's what I have to beat when I paint that. And when I paint the next thing after that, this is what I'm going to have to beat. And that's how I operate. Now, before I move away from the demons, just quickly, these are from the Undead Miniatures range in Warhammer Fantasy. The Crypt Horrors, Crypt Flayers, Vargulfs, Vargeist, one or the other. Anyway, I use them as demon shrikes / can use them as a demon brutes in 30k. And you can see it's basically just a Chaos Spawn head mounted on the fantasy body. And by doing this, you get a model on a 50mm base, quite a decent size. If I put it next to someone in, say, Power Armor, you can see they're just big enough, I think, to count as monstrous creatures. They're no smaller, realistically, than Demon Prince, the plastic Demon Prince models, which is good. So I think it works if to say these are monstrous creatures of some description. I mean, they're more than twice the height of the Marine. They're the same size, bigger than a box Dreadnought, about the same size as a Contemptor. So that's what I'll be using for that. So if anyone's curious, and I know you can probably not see too much of the paint job and that from this angle, but these miniatures probably only took me about 3 hours to build and paint. Really quick, really easy. So this is why I suggest this sort of thing for getting started in Horus Heresy, for playing demons, because it's really quick and easy to do. Yeah, cheap. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lay out the Christmas giveaway and talk about it a little, and the competition that you can enter and how to enter it and where, and when I'll be doing the giveaway. So with some creative editing, we'll be back in just a moment. Alright, so creative editing aside, here is the giveaway. Now, this is lacking 2 Imperial Fist Contemptor Dreadnoughts with a series of different weapon arms. Why? Because the arms haven't arrived yet. Those who kept track on Facebook may have seen me complaining about the cost of Contemptor Dreadnought arms and how ridiculous it's gotten at Forge World. I'm doing a giveaway for an Imperial Fists army painted in the pre-Rogal Dawn scheme. I've previously covered this army and the fluff behind them on the channel when I was talking about how to write fluff for your own armies and how to make it make sense logically within the universe of 30k. And I was talking about how bad fan fiction exists out there and the tropes you see in a lot of really bad chapters and legions that people come up with. And so the competition is simple. I want a Word document, make it as long or as short as you like, and it's got to give me bad fluff. For instance, things like your female Primarch that is responsible for single-handedly killing off 2 other legions, something like that. Or it could be 40k fluff, how you're a successor chapter of the Custodes, something along those lines. I want you to embody the worst fluff and make it a PDF document and email it to us at theoutercircle30k@gmail.com. And the worst army, I will email that person the worst army fluff, and they're going to receive this army. This is a fully painted, legitimate army, mostly made with Birding of Prospero kits, hence the Tartarus Terminators and the Space Marines themselves. As you can see, it's a very nicely painted army. Very nicely painted. It's got its own command squad. There's our banner right there. Solarite Gauntlet on the... Even though you can't take them technically on the command squad, they've got them because I thought it was cool. Combat shields, all that kind of thing, using the Templar Brethren. Our commanders. In their proper Mark III. So this is a nice little army. And this is the perfect start for a 30k army. Keeping in mind, you will get 2 Contemptor Dreadnoughts on top of what you see here once the arms arrive. And I paint them up. And this is, of course, a Templar-themed 30k army, and you could even use it for 40k as well, I'm quite sure. With your 10-man tactical squads and your power fists and things like that. This is an absolutely beautiful little army, I think you can all agree. And I'm sad to be parting with it in a way, but I wanted to do something nice for Christmas and for our 10,000 subscribers. So please, come on to the channel and email me a PDF with your worst home fluff for a chapter or Space Marine Legion or Mechanicum Battle Force, anything like that. I want it to be terrible, and I'm going to read out some of the most terrible examples on the channel and explain why they're so bad, because this is going to be a lesson to people who write bad fan fiction and bad fluff and try and present it as being something good. And that's the key here. If you want to write something bad and keep it to yourself or share it in the right circles, that's fine. But you go around telling people this is good fluff and that your army makes perfect sense, well, prepare to be disappointed when people don't agree with you. So, that's the giveaway. It's in typical salty Outer Circle fashion, but hey, you're going to get a beautiful Zone Mortalis / small 30k force out of it if you give me the winning entry. Anyway, back to the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching this video, and we'll see you all next time.